Welcome everyone to Boston 9/11 Truth. Tonight we have a very special guest, Roland Engel from Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. We're very honored to have you here, sir.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, why don't you fill us in on some of the latest endeavors with Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth? I know you guys have been really busy.
So, Sue, how about a little bio from Roland, if you want to give your street creds? So, if I assume everybody knows who you are, but in case.
You want to describe your own credentials?
Sure. Yeah, I'm the current board chairman of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and I've been in that role since 2021. And I served on the board before that for a number of years. I originally was attracted to the 9/11 Truth movement. I was working as an engineer in Oakland, California, and I heard Richard Gage make a presentation. This must have been about 2008, 2007. And I heard him make a presentation on the radio. And I went to see one of his presentations, and I was impressed with the information that he imparted to the audience. And at that time, I signed the petition that he had there asking for a new and impartial investigation. I think I was about the 350th engineer to sign that petition. Now we have over 3,600 people on that petition. And I was active in the movement for a while. I went to a number of events, worked on several different projects that we had going on, but at the time I had a lot going on in my life. I was still working, and I had some family issues that distracted me from my efforts there. In about 2009, Richard called me up and asked me if I was willing to be in a film that they were making, which turned out to be Experts Speak Out. And I appeared in that film and gave my opinions about the investigation and the problems with it. And then I lost contact again for a while, and then it was contacted again, I think it was about 2014, and asked if I would like to be on the board. So I agreed to that. At that time, I was getting ready to retire, and I took on the responsibilities of the board and worked in that capacity until 2021, when Richard left the board, left the organization, and I was asked to take his place as the chairman of the board, which I agreed to do, and I've served in that capacity ever since then. My personal background is I'm a civil engineer, a registered civil engineer in the state of California still, and I keep that registration active because I'm active with AE 9/11 Truth, and I have been an engineer in that capacity since 1967. I've worked in a variety of capacities, worked for the federal government, worked for the Air Force, the Navy, worked for the county of Los Angeles, and worked for various private small engineering firms. I started my own construction company in the late 1990s, and I've had three different construction companies during that time. I closed the last one in 2015. So I've worked actively I worked on the Minuteman missile system, and was active in designing and testing blast hardened facilities for the launch control centers and the silo sites. And I've worked on hydraulic systems, earth foundation systems, development of projects with residential developers, and in my construction business, we did a lot of light commercial and remodels and buildings in residential areas. So that's my CV, and I found the work with AE 911 Truth to be extremely challenging and interesting, and working with a great group of people that are very dedicated and have made some great contributions, I think, to our understanding of what happened on 9/11.
Is it my understanding that you were in the military, or is that not right?
No, I was in the military. I was in special forces and served as an enlisted person for a total of 6 years with all the active duty and reserve. And yeah, that was one of the things that I did in the late 60s.
Did you have a presentation you want to make, or would you like to field a bunch of questions? I certainly could start off with a few, but I don't want to interfere with what you had in mind.
Well, I thought I would just give you sort of a broad overview of the main issues that we're pursuing at this time, and then, open it up to questions and anything, comments. We can have a dialogue and sort of hopefully educate each other on what we're all about these days.
Excuse me,
That would be great.
I just joined, so who is the we when you say what we are looking into?
Architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Oh, thank you. Mhm.
Sure. So if that's okay, I'll just give you a broad view here for a few minutes of what we're involved in at this time, what our main efforts are. We do have as you may know, we challenged the report that NIST issued on Building 7, which they published in 2008. And we looked at that report and found a number of serious problems that we think invalidate the conclusions that they came to, which was that the building was brought down by office fires. So we think that was a completely we believe that investigation was driven by politics and not by engineering criteria, and that there must have been serious interference with the engineering personnel that created the report. So we've gone through and we've found a number of errors, and there's a process that you can go through with the government when the agencies issue reports under the Administrative Procedures Act, and you can ask them to correct any errors of fact that you have found in their reports. So we did that. We filed a request for correction with NIST back in 2000. I think it must have been 12 or 13, 14, somewhere in there at this point. And they stalled and didn't get back to us for a long time. We had to prod them. They didn't meet their deadlines, and they finally did respond, but their responses were effectively non-responses. They simply reiterated what they had declared in their reports, so they didn't really address any of the concerns that we gave to them. So then we appealed that, and they went through an appeal process, and they came back again with the same responses. So then we filed a complaint with the district court in the District of Columbia, and we asked the court to direct them to address our concerns. And the court came back with a decision that said that they didn't believe that we had legal standing to ask them to do so. We had not been affected by their decision, and we had a number of family members that joined us on that complaint. and independent engineers and our organization. So we appeal that to the appellate court, and they affirmed the lower court ruling, and on top of that said that they, in their opinion, that federal agencies, although they were required to submit reports, the reports didn't have to be accurate or truthful.
Okay.
So this was a very unfortunate occurrence, and of course, it's always a risk that when you do challenge the existing law, they may come back at you with a ruling that is not only adverse but actually harms other people, which is what the case was in this particular case. Because I've taken our situation and expanded it to all other persons that challenge federal agencies, and simply given them a blanket immunity from having to answer any responses in a truthful or an accurate manner. So we felt that that was so serious of an issue that affected not only us, but in the entire country, that we appealed it to the Supreme Court. The federal Supreme Court has accepted our request, and they are going to rule on whether or not they're going to take it under consideration later this month. I think actually next week. So, of course, that's a very slim chance. We know, and everyone I think understands, that the Supreme Court only takes about 1 out of 1,000 cases that is submitted to them. So we're of course still hopeful, but we understand that the chances of that happening are slim. However, whether or not they take that under consideration, if they don't take it under consideration, we will continue to campaign to educate people that this law is now affecting not only us in our quest for a truthful report on what happened, but it's going to affect everyone else who questions any government agency and the reports that they issue. So we're going to try to make that a much broader issue and build public support for a reversal of that decision. So that's one issue, the legal issue against NIST to try to correct the errors in their report on Building 7. Now, another thing, our main effort ongoing has always been to educate the engineering community about the problems with the reports that were issued by the government regarding the failure of the 3 buildings at World Trade Center on 9/11, the Twin Towers and Building 7. So we've got a presentation that we make, which you can see on our website. It's a PowerPoint presentation. Actually, there's several versions of it. And we've been taking those out to the engineering profession local chapters. We tried to go to the national offices, and they completely refused to talk to us and attack us as conspiracy theorists and try to denigrate our efforts. But we found that the local chapters and branches of these organizations are much more amenable to having a presentation, because a lot of them have local meetings every month, and they like to have presentations made by people on engineering subjects that are knowledgeable. And so we've gotten into more than 50 of those different meetings, and what we found is that when we explain the issues that we have regarding Building 7 and the Twin Towers to their members, we've gotten unanimous support for our position that a new investigation is necessary. Engineers, when they see the evidence and they are presented with our analysis of what we found, they agree with us. There's serious problems with these reports. They don't meet our professional criteria. And so that's why we've grown to having more than 3,600 signatures on our petition. And we've gotten a lot of positive feedback and recruited some engineers that are helping us in this effort. So that's the main focus of our effort. We understand that we're fighting on two fronts, really. We're trying to educate the engineering profession, because a lot of the engineers we found are not conversant with the problems with the NIST reports. And that's because the leadership of these organizations is suppressing that information. They're not, these are important issues for the engineering profession, but our leadership, unfortunately, has failed us. And the reason they failed us is because there were elements within those organizations that were drawn into the reports that the government provided, the government compiled, and so they have a vested interest in supporting those reports. So their position is that the government reports are fine, no need to look any further. Matter has been settled, and no need to discuss it. However, so that, if the engineers in their organization, if that's all they hear, then they think everything is fine. But when we take the actual issues and the analysis that we have to them, they change their mind and they agree with us. So we're trying to build a movement within the professional organizations to put pressure on the leadership to change their position, or else replace the leadership, so that we can get a new investigation, because the government is actually completely dependent upon our professional organizations. Their whole defense of their reports is that they are supported by the professional engineering organizations, which is true, because that's the position that the leadership has taken. However, there's a huge dichotomy between the engineers at the rank and file level that have been advised of the problems and their understanding, versus the leadership, which was drawn into the investigations themselves and now has been compromised by that participation. So that's we put a lot of time and effort into that effort. And at the same time, we're trying to educate the public as to what the problem is within our profession and what we're trying to do to correct it. So we're kind of trying to educate the public. At the same time, we're trying to educate our own rank and file engineers. So that's our primary effort. That's what we spend most of our time and most of our effort doing. In addition to the legal aspect, which I just went over, the challenge to the NIST reports and the pursuit of that through the court system, we've also made a number of movies, and we've helped with the Jeff Campbell effort to get a rehearing of the cause of death of the Campbell, a young man in the UK. And we're also working with a major engineering organization in Europe that is doing a review of the University of Alaska Fairbanks report, which we sponsored back in 2018, 2019, is finally published. And that is a refutation of the NIST report on Building 7. So we've got a number of irons in the fire, and we're attempting to pursue those efforts. So we've got some other things done. We've got a free fall episodes and a new podcast called The Focus, which we interview engineers and other people that are related to this issue, and try to encourage people to keep educated on what the progress of these issues is. So that's sort of an overview of what we're all about at this point. So I'll leave off there and open it up for questions or comments.
Could you say a little more about the parallel effort in the UK on Building 7?
Well, I don't want to jump the gun on this, because we've got a couple of people that are actually involved in that study, which has been going on for 3.5 years. And what we found is that they've come to conclusions. This is on Building 7. They're looking at the UAF report and they're comparing it to the NIST report. And I think they kind of jumped into this, the leadership at least, was of the opinion that the NIST report was going to prove, superior to the University of Alaska report. And so they agreed to do the study. And then as the study progressed, they found that in fact the University of Alaska Fairbanks report did have merit, and there were some serious questions there that the NIST report failed to resolve. So now they're dragging their feet. That was 3.5 years ago they started. I don't want to name the organization because at this point we're just being advised what's going on sort of behind the scenes. But we're working with the some of the engineers that are on that team, and they're advising us of the progress or the lack of progress, and we're attempting to help them at least get a report issued that will illustrate that there has been a peer review, a serious peer review of the the Fairbanks study, and that there has been finding that it has merit. So that's a big deal in the engineering community, and this organization is, once they found out how the investigation is going, they're now reluctant to actually publish it, and because nobody wants to be the first guy. I mean, the University of Alaska study is so important, and the silence from the engineering community and the academic institutions has been deafening. They don't want to address it because they're afraid to start talking about it, because it reveals the fact that they have been derelict in their duty in pursuing the information here that would be extremely useful for our profession in understanding what happened that day. So, but everybody understands that this is a very political issue. For them to jump in and take a position on it is probably not going to be helpful to their careers, their government funding, or whatever else they're dependent upon. So there's an extreme reluctance on their part to even engage with this issue at all. So most of them all of them, for all practical purposes, have just withdrawn from the discussion and really don't want to take part in it. So that's, we've been dealing with that since we started, and it goes on. And so what we get instead is a lot of complete silence, no response. When we're able to force them to respond through some legal maneuver or complaint or lawsuit or whatever, then we just get a repetition of the existing story. Nothing to see here. Everything's fine. And this is the situation that we're in. This is an issue that for people that are still working and have to conduct a business and make money, it could be a serious blow to their survival. Yeah. And so that's the way of the world. We know that. And most of our people they're either insulated for some reason because they have their own business and they're not dependent upon government largesse, or they are retired, or they're very young and ambitious and want to make a name for themselves in a cause that they consider to be important.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple other people with questions, and I just want to say that since this is going out on YouTube to a broad audience, and our webpage, please be respectful in your questions and professional for our esteemed guest. So David Schlesinger is next up with his question.
Thanks so much. First, I want to compliment you, and then I have a suggestion I'd like your response to. I love the article you folks did on the tipping of the top of the South Tower. That's one of the pieces of evidence I like to cite because it's so simple to get people to at least look at it, because it shouldn't have just collapsed straight down. It should have fallen over. But and also I compliment you on doing outreach, because that's my forte, and I haven't lived in Boston since 2000, but I spend time with the Boston group because I love the fact that they're into outreach. I have a proposal that you consider setting up a booth at the National Science Teachers Convention. They have a national one every year, I think usually 2 or 3 regional ones. And I mean, engineering and science are not the same, but I think they'd respect you enough that many science teachers would appreciate what you have to say. Is that interesting?
Well, I'll propose it to the board. We'll see what's involved in that in terms of its effort. You know, we are, of course, a small nonprofit. We have limited funds. We depend mostly on volunteers, and our donor base has declined over the years, because as the issue disappears into the history of our country and time goes by, it's much more difficult to motivate people to continue to support us. So but within those constraints, yes, we do like to go to conventions. Whenever we can, we have gone to conventions. We've had some good response there. And the science teachers sound like a very viable information source as far as we're concerned, because we do definitely understand the need to reach out to young people.
Last time I looked a couple of years ago, it was only about $1,000 to rent a booth for a session.
All right. Well, that sounds doable, depending upon the location and where we have our volunteers.
Sure.
And our
Right.
Boston group would support that. I mean, we would donate to it.
All right, that would be great.
David, do you know where it's taking place this year?
I don't. I haven't looked that up, but
Okay.
I don't even know the formal name of the organization. I have other suggestions. I just hope there's a way I could maintain contact with you, Roland.
Sure, you can get I'll give you my email address. You can send me things, and
Great.
you know,
Thank you.
whatever seems reasonable, you know, we'll discuss at the board level, and we can make decisions about things like that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
What was the title of the article on the tipping?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't recall.
All right.
It's on the website, I believe.
All right, good.
Next,
Okay, anybody else?
Craig McKee is next up.
Greg, go.
Can't hear you, Craig.
Your mic isn't working. You're not muted, but your mic isn't working.
All right.
Okay, well, next we have someone who posed a question in the chat, Maxwell Bridges. Are you able to speak, Maxwell, to pose your question?
Sure, I can. Hey, Craig, I don't mean to be taken away from your time. Hopefully you get your audio back. What are the guidelines and requirements for attempting to make an RFC to NIST? I mean, is there a NIST.gov URL?
Yeah, you can go on their website. Every government agency has to give you the opportunity to submit requests for correction. So it should be on it should be listed on their website. I mean, that's where we found it.
Okay, but you were asking, your efforts were asking them to revisit their description for WTC 7, right?
That's correct.
All right. Well, therefore, I would have to find papers on other things. Like if I wanted, I mean, do they have anything on WTC 4, 5, or 6?
If they do, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, therefore, if it's an omission, then therefore you don't even have standings to make an RF, request for correction, because they didn't publish anything from the get-go.
That's correct, as far as I know.
Interesting. All right.
The only reason they issued anything on Building 7 and the Twin Towers was because they were directed to by Congress.
Okay, and when you ask for corrections, do you provide evidence as to what you think they did wrong, or what explains it better?
Yeah, we submitted something like, I think it was a 120-page, document that went into great detail as to what the problems with the report was. I think there was 8 separate issues that we raised with them at that time.
All right, well, thank you.
Sure, I think, I can't swear to this, but I believe you can get access to our request for correction on our website. Now, if that's not true, I'll check that out and see if that's true, because it should be there.
Well, I'm not saying it is or isn't. I'm just concerned about, like, I have an alternative theory, and I don't want to bog down this discussion with that, but I'm being hammered by, oh, you need to submit an RFC to NIST, otherwise, you're nothing. And so I'm just wondering what that process is, because I would write it up. But you've already answered that question, so I'll be looking around the NIST website some more, or I'll have 9/11 revisionist do that, because he's the one that keeps making that as a goalpost.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Roland, it is on your site, ae911truth.org/NIST, and along the right column, all of their documentation through the years over this is there.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Well, I think I'm next up, if that's all right. And then Al. So I was wondering if the legislative branch can possibly step in if the Supreme Court, does not have a hearing on this. Can there be a bill introduced to hold federal agencies such as NIST accountable for verifiable information? Because it's beyond 9/11, like you said. This sets a precedent for almost everything. And it's very undemocratic that they feel that they can just say, well, what we say doesn't have to be true.
Yeah, that's astounding. And that would be our next step, would be to go after Congress to pass legislation to override this. They're going to need new legislation. If the court's interpretation is that the existing legislation doesn't require truthful or accurate reports, then there needs to be new legislation that corrects that. And that would be the only way to really do that.
Has a bill been drafted to submit to to Congress, to your representative in Congress to introduce that he can?
Not at this point. We're still waiting on the Supreme Court to weigh in, but
Right.
we are anticipating that this is probably not going to fly with the Supreme Court just based on the odds.
Right.
And so we're going to make a campaign out of it that's much broader than 9/11, and we hope in that it gives us an advantage, because I think it broadens the scope of
Yes.
what we're all about and indicates to people exactly why 9/11 is still important.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Al, you're up next.
Sure, I had a couple of questions. One, Gene Laratunda in Pennsylvania, combined with Mick Harrison of the Lawyers Committee, has talked about going to the state court because of the standing issue, where they live in the state, and starting a lawsuit. I don't know if you've ever looked into that in California, or whether that's even been on your radar. I would let Gene answer, sort of talk about that. The other thing I wanted to bring up is I am, and some of the people on the call here are part of what we call PAPA, Protecting All Protectors Alliance. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a group that has challenged NIST, or let's back up and say, we've been to 3 NFPA conventions, National Fire Prevention Association, and the case that Papa is making is to try to get the NFPA to challenge NIST in their interpretation of high-rise fires and the staging for firemen. In other words, NIST has come out and said that it's unsafe to set up your staging area within a high-rise A1 fire rated building for fear that it would collapse. And the NFPA is very clear about that is a protocol that they stand behind. There's a fellow who's written in the NFPA booklet about high-rise fires, Roland, who was
Ula.
a fire captain in Seattle. And anyway, long story short, would your group have any interest in sort of either combining some effort or speaking with Papa, or even going to the convention? We're having a convention in Orlando in June, and we're trying to enlist help from anywhere, and we were also trying to get funds. But anyway, that was the other thing I wanted to bring up, and the website, if you go to it, you'll see what it's all about. Finally,
And could you give me the website information?
yeah, it's protectingall.org.
Protectingall.org.
Yeah, you just go to that,
It was
Okay.
set up by Eric Lawyer
right?
and Richard Gage and Raul Angulo and Eric Lawyer are going to the NFPA Firefighter Safety Convention in Orlando on June 17th.
So that is an NFPA convention.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And we've got an exhibit booth there. We're on the team too. We've got an exhibit booth there and a classroom.
I'd like to add a little bit to what Al said, since you don't seem to be familiar with this effort. It's really, we're very excited about it in our group because Raul Angulo is the author of the the National Fire Prevention Association's book, the official guidebook on how you fight all different kinds of fires. And so, among other things, he authored the chapter on how you fight fires in high-rise buildings. And the chapter says you set up shop in the lobby and then you operate in the building. And Al kind of misspoke, but by accident. I mean, NIST did not say that you can't operate out of the lobby of a building. They didn't say anything about it at all. It's just that their version of Building 7 implies that, oh my goodness, you shouldn't set up shop in the lobby of a building, or because you might die there when the building collapses. So Raul Angulo, the author, notes that what he wrote about how you fight a fire is contradicted by what NIST says. And if NIST is right, well, then the whole official nationwide approach to fighting buildings and high rises is wrong and needs to be revised. So in the presence in the convention, they don't start off by saying anything about 9/11. They always have this wall full of the pictures of a dozen, burning steel frame buildings, and compare it to, Building 7 with the little fires and stuff like that. But they don't start out talking about 9/11. They start about talking about this problem that affects the safety of firemen in high-rise building fires. And then, of course, eventually to the extent that they enlist conversants, the conversation eventually, gets around to the issues around in 9/11 and Building 7. And it seems to be a pretty effective way of breaking through the fear that even allows a fireman to stop, engage in any conversation at all. And it's, it's a good way to suck people into a conversation that takes them there. And that's why we're very excited about it. And this is the first time we will have a classroom in addition to the booth in this fourth time around. So
Third time around.
I thought we already did 3, no?
No,
This is the third? Okay, sorry.
that's okay.
So I just want to finish up. And finally, have you had any contact with the Lawyers Committee and Mick Harrison and their Supreme Court case? Are you familiar with that? They presented a case to the Supreme Court. And I don't know whether it's paralleling what you're had done, or exactly if you can speak to that. And
Yeah, Mick is our lawyer. He's the one that's drafted and is going to present this issue in
Okay.
front of the court.
all right, I did.
And so, yeah, we're familiar with his prior efforts through him.
Yeah,
And yeah, Mick is a very competent guy, and he's doing a great job for us.
yeah, he is excellent. Lastly, you touched on this, but the engineering societies and student groups where you've had the most success reaching out. I think you said that, in the universities, you get nowhere with the administrative people that are actually teaching the classes, but I'm just curious as to, what sort of outreach you've had with students and engineering societies, I guess, if you have any comment on that.
Well, the big gorilla on the block is American Society of Civil Engineers, and they're the ones that are the most well-established engineering society in the country. They go back to 1857, and civil engineering being the oldest engineering profession, they sort of dominate the field, and people have the other organizations, I think, look very much to them to see what they're doing. And they were very much involved in the compilation of the reports, the NIST reports. A lot of their people were active in those reports. And so we focused on them primarily and have had some success with them. I said we've made more than 50 presentations, but we've had more than twice that many that were turned down and rejected after we had been accepted at the local level. If somebody at the national level found out about it, then they would kick it down to the local level and say, you should invite these people in, they're conspiracy theorists and so on. And so then we would get rejected after we had already set up a presentation. So they're very active in defending their role in what's happened. And we have gotten through to some of their student organizations at the universities. I think we got at Purdue, University of Puerto Rico, some of the other organizations. I can't recall offhand, but the student organizations are often controlled they have a faculty advisor. And if the faculty advisor is at all conversant with what's going on, then the faculty advisor operates in such a way as to prevent these presentations from taking place. So it's a lot of work to get a presentation off, because you have to, first of all, contact them. You have to establish what it is you're trying to do. Then they have to clear it with their advisor. And if their advisor doesn't shoot it down, then they get back to you. Then you set it up. Then you got to get your volunteer out there with the presentation. And so it's, it's a multifaceted effort that takes a lot of time to establish. So we've also made presentations in front of the National Society of Professional Engineers and the Society of Structure, the American Society of Structural Engineers, and so we're trying to broaden our effort and reach out to as many of these organizations as we can. But we understand that ASCE, if we could change the position of ASCE, would probably have a domino effect throughout the profession.
And if you think there's any hope that you're ever going to penetrate that, or what's your sense?
Well, we try to be practical and rational, looking at the, my position is we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Other events could affect this in a way that we have been unable to. But in the meantime, we want to prepare a base of people, a significant minority at least, within the profession that understand the specifics of what the problems are and will fight for a position once they feel that there's a chance that we can make it happen. Right now, we have not got to that tipping point yet, but we're going to continue down that road, and hopefully time is on our side in the long run. But we know that the truth is going to come out eventually. This is like Galileo and the Catholic Church, okay? We know that at some point it's going to be acknowledged in a widespread fashion that we were right. How events play out to make that actually happen, we don't know the specifics of that, and nobody does, but we're going to keep on, and we know that there's significant support for this once engineers understand what the issue is, and that's going to carry the day in the long run.
I have to say, I admire your focus and staying on message. We try to do that at Boston 9/11, keep it simple and direct to what, I would follow your lead almost and not wandering off onto other subject matter. But anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate your being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. We do try to stay focused on our role as engineers and architects, people that have a certain expertise. We're trying to stay focused on our expertise so that we don't get attacked, because we get attacked all the time for being conspiracy theorists anyway. And we're trying not to give any ammunition to those people that would try to discredit us in that manner.
Okay.
Can I just ask if I'm being heard now?
You
Yeah,
are,
we hear you.
yeah.
Okay. So it turned out I got a new microphone, and then I had to select it in the thing, and I hadn't done that before. So I'm happy to wait my turn, but I just want to make sure
you had your turn and it didn't work, so you're next up.
Okay, appreciate it. Yeah, Roland, I just this is sort of a bit following up what you were just talking about. Because I remember when you spoke to the 9/11 and other deep state crimes teleconference a couple of years ago, you made a point that that I thought really hit home for me, and in terms of why the engineering profession is important, and it really it made sense to me, and I just wanted to sort of get you to comment on it, and maybe it'll resonate for people here, and that was that you said that whenever any efforts that are made to push for a new investigation, the big obstacle is always the official reports, because anybody that wants to just deflect any such requests are always going to hold those things up and say, well, we've already done this, we've already had all this investigated. And it really comes down to these reports that were done by engineers that were working for organizations like NIST and the ASCE. So it's really, that's the reason that you said at the time that the engineering profession is so important, is that that's the roadblock that gets in the way of any attempt to get a new investigation, is that they can always just hide behind those reports. And that's why you're trying to sort of punch a hole in that. could you, I mean, I don't know if that's really a question, but could you just sort of comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're architects and engineers. This thing came down in the middle of our profession. We didn't ask for this. It just so happens that the destruction of those buildings falls into our area of expertise, and so we were thrown into the middle of this, and it is a very political issue because, of course, that attack was used to change world history in a major way that affected almost everybody on the globe. So we found ourselves in the very uncomfortable position of being in the middle of a political issue, and our expertise, depending upon how it was reflected, was going to affect things far beyond our profession. And so that's the reason why it's been so contentious, and there are so many people that shy away from it because it has ramifications that are far and widespread. Now, when NIST is confronted with criticisms of their reports, the first line of defense that they take is that the engineering professional organizations support their reports. And that's the end of the story as far as they're concerned. So they actually depend upon our support to make their reports have any credibility. If we were able in some manner to remove that support and take a position in our profession that the reports are flawed and there needs to be new unbiased investigations, that would be a game changer. NIST would have no leg left to stand on. The only thing that they are relying on is our profession to back them up, and that's the only thing that they have really is an appeal to authority. And so their influence amongst our professional leadership has been the critical factor that's enabled them to avoid having to confront the false narrative that was created by the NIST reports. So, yeah, we're in an uncomfortable situation where we have to confront our own professional leadership and try to get them to come around to a position that's consistent. All we're asking is a position that's consistent with our whole history, with our investigative process and our scientific method and what we know about building materials and so on and so forth. We're not asking for anything extraordinary. All we're asking for is historical precedent to prevail. And they are coming back and saying, well, your organizations back us up, so we don't need to go here and we don't need to look at this anymore. So that's why we're focusing on our professional organizations. We understand that that's the key. If we could knock that out, NIST would have to reconsider their position.
Yeah, well, great, thank you. That's the point that that grabbed my attention the first time I heard you speak about it, and I think it's good for other people to hear it because it makes it very clear as to why it's important, why AE is taking this particular route, and you know what the objective is. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I listen, I appreciate all the effort that everybody's making in the 9/11 movement and everybody that's trying to get to the bottom of this. It's just that we have a very narrow role that is focused on our professional responsibilities and our professional expertise in matters that came to light during this attack. So that's the position that we're in, and we're trying to play our role in the bigger picture.
Right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Next up is Jean LaRotunda.
Thank you. Roland, thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Several questions. One actually, what Al had asked, and it tails off into my first question. Mick and I were working possibly on a state level grand jury in Pennsylvania, but what I'm finding out, doing more research on it, the crime has to be committed in the federal district in which the crime happened. And in Pennsylvania, really, I can only go for Shanksville. I know the Dancing Israelis drove through Pennsylvania, so there's very limited scope on what we could go after. Which leads to my question for you, because the Supreme Court request for correction of Building 7, you said was filed in D.C. Building 7 happened in the 2nd District, which I believe is the New York, greater New York area. How was it? How did you guys get it filed in D.C.? Do you know?
You know, you got me there. I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to pose that to Mick as to why they chose that particular court. I don't really know. I think that maybe it's because the federal government, you know, it was filed in response to legislation that was passed by Congress. So maybe that's the answer to that, but I couldn't tell you for sure.
I'll ask Mick, but thank you.
Yeah, ask Mick.
Second one, you had said you were in you did studies in Earth Foundation systems, and I was wondering if that helped you out with any of the research you've done in buildings 1 and 2 and 7.
Well, in terms of general knowledge, I mean, yeah, it's something that, you know, grounds me in particular, pardon the pun, in you know, our investigation. But you know, most of the expertise. Listen, I'm up here at the board level, and we're looking at a lot of engineers who are contributing based upon their expertise. So we have people that were, you know, all kinds of different expertise. Civil engineering being a very broad field, and a lot of people specialize in, say, structures, or foundations, hydraulics, so on and so forth. So we've been able to utilize that broad base to find people that could provide us with an analysis or answers that we were looking for at any particular time. So that's been one of the strengths of our organization, is that we have a lot of people that come from different areas, and we know that we can go to them over some particular issue. Myself, I'm basically just an administrator at this point.
Fair enough. Other question, ASC leadership, that really seems to be they seem to be the gatekeepers here. And I know you guys have talked about educating the underlings, if you will, to try to influence them, or even waiting for this ASCE leadership to age out. Just wanted to get your thoughts on which way you think probably is the best chance, waiting for them to age out or educating the underling class of the ASCE.
Well, what I've observed is that the leadership is very intent upon passing their point of view down to the new people. As you know, most of these organizations, they change leadership on a yearly basis. So they have a past president, an existing president, and a future president. And they rotate, you know, they bring them up and bring them along, and then they're very I have to say they're very efficient at maintaining the discipline of their outlook at the upper leadership. They have national boards, they have regional boards, then they have local. So even at the regional level, their influence is very strong, and they're able to maintain that. They have been able to so far, and of course we're working at the local level, and we're trying to encourage people to be involved in the organization and challenge, you know, work their way up the scale, work our way up the ladder. I think that's going to be the most effective in the long run.
Yep. Last one, it's a video clip. It's a statement you made, and I love it because I think it addresses the issue well, and it's probably going to be uncomfortable for a couple people in the room, because I know they hats off to anybody. However, whatever you believe about 9/11, believe it and run with it your way. But I think one thing that we should all agree on are the essential facts. There's a great quote that I love from St. Augustine that says, "In the essentials, unity; in the non-essentials, liberty; and in everything, love." So I think we really should be able to agree on one thing. Can everybody see the screen real quick? Yeah. Okay, here we go. It's real short. It's only, I think, 10 seconds long.
Even if it was a directed energy weapon, or if it was nuclear, or if it was CGI planes, or whatever it was, all these people should be saying, we need a new investigation, but they don't.
So that's it simply. I love, didn't need to get into it. I think we should all be able to agree that we want an investigation, and just wondering if you could speak on that just a little bit.
Well, I think that's a very important concept. I mean, listen, we know that we're up against a cabal of criminals who carried out a mass murder and changed the course of history in the world. One of the cover-up is the most difficult part of the crime that they have to manage. It's ongoing, and all of us out here that want to see truth in this matter need to respect the fact that we don't necessarily all agree. Just as the quote that you gave us from St. Augustine, we don't have to agree on the particulars, but we do agree that the existing paradigm, the existing narrative, is false and is a cover-up. And if we could force a new investigation, we can let all opinions be presented, and we could get to the bottom of what actually happened. I don't want to argue with people that agree with me that this is a major crime, changed world history, and we need to get to the bottom of it. That's what we're attempting to do in our particular sphere, and we respect others that are trying to do so from wherever they're coming from. That's, I think, so important for our movement, because obviously the criminals would like to divide us and have us all fighting amongst each other. And that would be very helpful for them, because it prevents us from focusing on what we need to do to get the job done. So I agree with you. Thank you for that comment.
Very well said. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Next up is Henry McLean.
Hey there, Roland. Good to see you again. It's been a few years since we tried getting you and Leroy to Boston for the event back in 2019, where for those on the group, we had 25 write an appeal to the Boston Society of Architects, and that all sort of fell apart. And that was really tied in, as you say, Roland, to the AIA National. I'm just curious if you're, and I take the other comments earlier about finding new blood or waiting for the old ones to drop off, and your response there is pretty accurate. I mean, we keep pushing on the leadership at the Boston Society of Architects, and it's equally as frustrating as it was 4 years ago. I'm curious if you saw the Simpson, Gumpert, and Hager presentation or heard about it, the collapse analysis of the World Trade Center towers following 9/11 that happened on Friday, January 28th, this last in 24, by Mehdi Zargami. He's the senior principal there. I think he was one of the investigators, and SGH was involved in the beginning phases, I believe, with FEMA early on in the investigations. And I guess the thing I keep thinking about is that if there were some third party available to sorry about that, to essentially hold a debate, and which is, you know, in having someone like yourself face off with Mehdi. This was obviously done for AIA credit, and I got a few credits. There was I'm still trying to get the transcript of the messaging that went on during the presentation to share with folks, because what they did is they scanned through all of the chats and then just picked cherry picked a few questions that really didn't challenge anything according to the official version. So
yeah, I attended that.
Oh, good.
And I submitted some questions, but they didn't respond. They didn't address them.
Right.
So I think, SGH, they're a major player. There's a number of people that are associated with SGH and the reports themselves. And I see them as they were a big winner in that whole thing. They came out with a lot more presence and a lot more, I'm sure, contracts and contacts through that participation that makes them a very interesting place of intersection.
Right.
And one of the centers of one of the primary centers of where decisions were made, and I think it's through those connections that they've closed ranks around those groups and those organizations, and they are big supporters of the official theory, and they exert influence throughout the profession
Right.
in regards to attitudes about that. So it's interesting that they come out and they got people like Zaragami, making these presentations. I think that will increase they actually have to consolidate their position going forward. And they're actually, I don't know if you heard about, they wrote a new, there's been a sort of a committee that was formed to change the codes regarding blast protection. They've come out with I think it's called 7623 ASCE people, and 6 people that were involved in the NIST reports headed up that committee. And it becomes like a cancer. Once you allow these false ideas to get into your profession and move forward, then you begin to educate the future with false notions, and these ideas become widespread. They become accepted, and pretty soon your profession loses its ability to respond appropriately to its responsibilities to the public.
Right. Well, thank you again for staying in there, and we'll keep pushing here with the BSA. There's the group NESI, Northeast Sustainable Energy Association, has their annual conference, biannual conference in New York, and we're going to see about pulling something together for a presentation on that. And I can reach out to you on that if you're interested.
Sure. Yeah, we would. Please keep me informed, and we'll do whatever we can to assist you.
Sounds great. Thanks for joining us tonight. Great.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Next up, we have David Schlesinger again.
Yes, thanks so much. Yes, I had some thoughts about this problem of in 2/3 of the colleges that you try to speak at, the administration or faculty won't let you. My proposal for you to come back is to just make a presentation to that faculty advisor and whoever is the titular student head of the organization privately. And I think that the student will see that you know what you're talking about. And only then would you expect to be able to speak to the whole group. I also wanted to note that the term conspiracy theory as a put down basically implies that no one in power would ever abuse that power, which is of course absurd. And I really encourage people to raise that when the term is used. I was just in DC for other reasons, and while I was there, and I'm very left of center normally, I went by Marjorie Taylor Greene's office and thanked her for she wasn't there for attending something which was standing up against in the war in Ukraine. And I noted that the issue with conspiracy is, what's the evidence? I mean, the people in power aren't guilty of everything they're accused of, but you should at least hear the evidence. Thank you.
Agreed. It's a good point.
Wow.
All right. Anybody else? We had some.
I don't know why, but my hand I've had my hand up for a long time and it's disappeared 3 times. I don't know.
My hand's up too, Sue. So, but let's Richard Krushnick go first.
Okay, sorry. I don't know why it's not showing. All right. Go ahead, Richard.
I'd just like to make a few comments centering 9/11 in the global changing scene and its current moment. Ever since the coup of 1963, the same people have been in power that are in power today. The military industrial complex and resource and heavy industry that operates around the globe. And as I believe we all know from the PNAC 2000 paper and Brzezinski's Grand Chessboard in 1997, 9/11 was clearly deliberately done in order to get Americans willing to go fight and die in the Middle East and Central Asia for another 50 years in order to try and eke out one last unipolar American century before the inevitable unification of the Eurasian continent made the US a bit player on the national stage, on the international stage. And so far that's gone very poorly. And no part of the plan has succeeded so far. Afghanistan and Iraq were done in order to straddle Iran, which is the only country on the Persian Gulf and the Caspian Sea and the shortest pipeline route from here to there. And that has failed. In fact, it resulted in increased Iranian influence in the area. And now we're engaged in three aspects of the global conflict in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and China, Taiwan. And in all three of those areas, the United States is losing and will continue to lose. Russia is, the war is over in Ukraine. There'll be a lot more dying, but the terms will be dictated by Russia when it's over. In the Middle East, Israel is already in the midst of a scene. They can't even handle a single one of them. Can't handle Gaza, can't handle Hezbollah, can't handle the Houthis, can't handle what's going on in Syria and Iraq related to the Gaza conflict. And China, the Chinese already control the South China Sea. There's absolutely nothing that the US can do to reverse that. And there isn't a chance in hell that the United States could do anything significant to defend Taiwan if China wants to take it over. With, of course, one exception, and that is the use of nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are the only tool in the military toolkit that the United States has, which could change the trajectory of all three of these conflicts in terms of altering what is their inevitable conclusion.
I'm sorry,
So
Richard, I need to interject. Does your question, do you have a question that relates to 9/11?
No, I'm almost done. I'm almost
Boston
done.
9/11.
All I'm trying to say is I'm locating 9/11. What was 9/11 all about? And what's happened partially as a result of 9/11? And why what was supposed to happen by its perpetrators has not happened. And in fact, the reverse is happening. The unipolar world is already gone. The multipolar world is here, and it's about to manifest itself more or less totally. Same thing's happening to the dollar. It's all going to unwind and come to some kind of a conclusion fairly soon. It's merely to point out what Roland pointed out, that 9/11 changed world history. Yes, it did. And it changed it in exactly the opposite direction as its perpetrators intended. We're seeing the denouement of all of that happening right now. And we will either have a world a multipolar world that can go on without too much devastation, or the only country, with the exception of Israel, of course, versus Iran, the only country that may be the first to use nuclear weapons in any of these three arenas is the United States. And let's hope it doesn't.
Well, I think those are some very, I think we would all agree 9/11 was the act of desperate people.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, it wasn't the act of people that are in control and are cruising along and everything's going well for them.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a desperate act.
Yep.
And desperate people do desperate things, and often the results are not what they hope for.
And the problem is now they're more desperate than ever.
Yeah. Thanks,
So
Rick.
in all that, Richard, is there a push to reveal what really is behind 9/11? Yeah, I mean, I'm sharing that with.
Well, there's a push on my part. Whenever I get the opportunity, I talk about it to my mass peace action colleagues, and I guess you could say contingently I've got a little bit published on it. I am writing it up right now, and we'll attempt to get it published again, but.
But back to what Roland, what you're doing, is there an opportunity in all of this discussion and getting through to kids today about this, dynamic situation with war being threatened all over the planet again, in order to encourage them to, I mean, I understand AE 9/11 Truth is focused on the specifics of the engineering and getting the engineering community, but it is, as Richard points out, a big political conundrum that
But that's not Roland, that's not AE 9/11 Truth's job. That could just provide ammunition to discredit them. That's our job.
I wanted to get Roland's response.
Well, we're fully cognizant of that big picture, but
Yeah.
we're the mechanics down here at this level,
Yeah.
trying to follow the evidence of 9/11. Listen, we have a room at this point of some 400 or 500 people, and we know some of these people were used to make the cover-up happen. They had contact with the criminals. Somebody contacted them and said, "You're going to make this decision about this issue," and that.
Whoops.
We lost your
You're
sound.
muted, Roland. You're muted.
Where did he go?
Yeah, there he is.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry
Okay.
about that.
That's all right. Probably my fault.
No, it
At
wasn't.
any rate, we're trying to follow the evidence up the chain to the criminals, because they had people in the engineering profession that they coerced or incentivized in some way to make decisions during these investigations that led the investigations away from the evidence. So we've identified 24 decisions that were made in compiling these reports on the Twin Towers and on Building 7. We can identify the people that were involved in making those decisions. So we know somewhere in that group of people was someone that had the authority and had the backing of powerful people to detour that investigation and make sure it didn't go here following the evidence. It went over here down some rabbit hole. So we've got a room full of suspects who are at the operational level. These are not the criminals that carried out the crime. These are people who made the decisions that allowed the cover-up to function. They could lead us to the criminals if we could somehow incentivize them to tell what they know. So we're hoping that by identifying these, what we call persons of interest, that some of them eventually will be incentivized to step forward and tell us what they know about who was directing this from behind the scenes. So at the same time that people like Richard are looking at the big picture and the people up here who benefited from this crime, we're looking at the operatives down here who carried out the crime and carried out the cover up, and we're hoping we can meet somewhere in the middle.
All right, next up, I guess Chris Bergier was having trouble raising his hand. Did you still have a question, Chris? You there?
Trying to unmute.
Okay, you guys can hear me okay?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you, Roland, for all your work. Yeah, I myself, I'm a licensed professional engineer. I worked several years in steel fabrication, so I'm very knowledgeable. But I also I think I'm a researcher, but I also come with a perspective that if a researcher really cares about 9/11, they'll also be an activist, because you know I try to put equal amount of time into activism and research. I guess one question I have, I mean, shouldn't the case, instead of going to the Supreme Court, shouldn't it go to a military tribunal?
Well, since it initiated with a request for correction from NIST, and NIST was directed to carry out this law by Congress, the military is not directly involved. Now, the military is involved with the cases down at Guantanamo, and some things have come to light down there. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Linda. Anyway, she's got a group.
Well, no, I'm very familiar that they have big courtrooms in Guantanamo Bay right now. You can Google that on the New York Times, and that the current president isn't able to shut down Guantanamo Bay. So it looks like we have an active military doing something kind of by itself. But since 9/11 was such a treasonous crime and had such, you know, very powerful people, that it just thinks that type of case should go to a military tribunal, not the Supreme Court. Would you agree?
I have to go with what we're forced to do. They claim that they don't have jurisdiction, and the courts do, and so that's the arena that we're directed to.
Yeah.
And even there, we're told that we don't have standing. That's their argument. They haven't addressed any of the issues that we raise. They simply say, you can't speak to us because you don't have standing, because you weren't affected.
Well, they also might mean that we don't have standing in this type of a court too. No?
Actually, Chris, I posed your question to the lawyers committee.
Yeah.
And Bruce on the lawyers committee came back and said that there's no way a citizen or independent attorney, you have to be a prosecutor. And of course, that's the fox guarding the hen house, because prosecutors are government. And you'd have to be in the military. So there doesn't seem to be a way that any of us can actually initiate a military tribunal. That has to come from a prosecutor in the military.
Okay, and my second question, I like the Hulsey report, because Leroy Hulsey, he just stops at the fact that Building 7 was brought down by controlled demolition, and not the means and the method of the controlled demolition. And when I first joined Boston 9/11 Truth, I was a very big supporter of directed energy weapon, the research associated with that. So I felt very uncomfortable being forced to hand out literature that says thermite. So is there any way that you could maybe just revise your literature just to leave it at the controlled demolition? I guess if someone asks the question, well, what type of controlled demolition, I would say, well, it's still controversial in our movement, whether it's conventional, some type of exotic technology, you leave it at that. And the average layman's, if they're interested, then they can go. But I do agree that it's not wise to say, oh, the towers were brought down by Buck Rogers' beam disintegration weapon, because you're just gonna they're just gonna confirm that you're batshit crazy, right, or something. So and then also your literature store on your website seems to be down. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, we're in the process of rebuilding that right now. We're almost done with that. So
Oh, okay.
we had to transform our whole operation once the change that happened when Richard left. So we're in the process of rebuilding that right now. We had a meeting yesterday. It sounds like we're almost done.
But are you rewriting some of your literature? Because I wasn't even I don't even believe you had any literature on Leroy Holsey. Except the DVD. I don't think you had any flyers that mentioned anything about his report. I actually made a flyer on his report and handed it out to 250 people last Monday at the Battle of the Green.
Well, his report is listed on our website, and we make reference to his report in all of our presentations, our PowerPoint. His work is a central aspect of what we have to say. So
yeah. Here's the flyer that I created there. I was able to pass out 250 of these in about 20 minutes.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's good.
And I just wanted to ask you another question here. There's this beam. Can you see my? Hold on, one more screen share here. Did you see the screen now?
Yeah.
So this beam was in the Bankers Trust building on the 15th floor, and you see the flanges buckle like ripple like a lasagna noodle, and the paint is still not burnt. So when I was in a structural steel fabrication business for a while, I showed that to one of the employees there. He was very, very disturbed because he realized that the paint normally when you heat up a beam, the several hundred degrees Fahrenheit to get the beam to glow, or the paint's going to start burning off when you do some mild welding. So that buckling effect right there shows me of some very exotic technology. I don't think a beam would naturally buckle like that. Are you in agreement, or?
Well, I'd have to think about that.
Okay.
I'm not one to jump into that area without some extensive research. And listen, if we thought that there was significant information that indicated, we know that there are independent corroboration of the fact that the products of thermite reactions were found in the dust.
Okay.
So we know that at the very least thermite was involved. If there were other energy sources involved, that's quite possible. But until we see significant evidence that's been vetted and peer reviewed and all that other stuff that says, yeah, we know this happened, well, we'd be open to that, but we haven't seen that yet.
It has been reviewed, like, Paul Hellyer, the former defense minister of Canada, reviewed directed energy weapons and gave it a thumbs up. He's he is a defense minister, plus he has an engineering degree. So if he put his approval on it, I would say that's pretty heavyweight right there. I don't know if you're familiar with him supporting it, but he did before he passed away.
No, I wasn't familiar with that.
Yeah. Well, I just challenge you to maybe look into that more, and because it is the truth is important, and the means and methods of the destruction of the towers, the research is very important, along with the activism. So.
Sure. Yeah. Well, anything that you think that supports this, that is credible, and that we can look at, send it to me, and
Okay. No, I really appreciate that. I'll take you up on your offer, sir.
Okay. Yeah. I'll look at it, and if it has, if after we discuss it and we think that it has merit, we'll look into it.
Okay. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
And Craig McKee has raised his hand again.
Yeah, hi, Roland. Just a a follow-up about what Gene was saying before about unity. I wanted to make a comment on that, and then you can weigh in if you like. I just want to make the point that unity is, I mean, nobody's going to speak against unity in terms of wanting a new investigation or in terms of believing that 9/11 was, is the, sorry? Oh, sorry, thought I heard someone speak. Or that 9/11 was not as we've been told, that it was, a deception or a lie. The question that I have about unity, though, is it depends on what one means by unity. I mean, if unity means that we drop evidence because there isn't unanimity on it, then I would argue that that means that we're going to be watering down the case that we have to make to the point where we're actually harming ourselves. And I've heard the suggestion made by some people on the call tonight that we should not focus on things we don't agree on. And I think if you apply that logic, then theoretically, you wouldn't even mention thermite. You wouldn't get into any details about the evidence, because there's always going to be somebody that's going to disagree with one element of the evidence or another. But and when it comes to, like you mentioned in that little clip there about mini nukes and directed energy weapons, I think a lot of people want to spend a lot of time fighting over those things. But I think I agree with the point I think you were making in the video, which is that we know that it was a controlled demolition. We can prove that. So there's no real need for us to fight over these other things to the detriment of our cause. But my point is that just because some people in the movement don't agree on the method doesn't mean we just toss that evidence out because it's not unanimous. And I think the same thing goes for other aspects of the 9/11 evidence. I think the suggestion that we have to be unanimous or else we don't focus on that evidence, I think is kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. I think we have to, I think we have a strong consensus about many aspects of the 9/11 evidence. You're focusing on one, the major area of it, but there are other ones, the Pentagon, Shanksville, different ones, where there's a very strong consensus on those things. And so I guess my concern is the idea that, well, let's stay away from something we don't agree on, really is like an invitation to those who might want to interfere with our efforts. All they have to do is create a controversy in any area, and then some people would have us then put that aside because it's controversial. So I think that's a danger of what of this type of unity that we're talking about. I'm all for unity, but if unity means watering down what we have to offer to the world, we can't just say we want to do investigation with no evidence to present. No one's going to give us an investigation based on we think we want one. We need the evidence. We need strong evidence to back it up. So that's my concern with that whole concept. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, but I don't mean by unity that we discard everything that we have disagreements about. That's not what I mean by unity. What I mean by unity is that we have respect for other people that disagree with us,
right?
And we think that they have a place in the movement to present what they view, and we can discuss this, but it shouldn't devolve to the point where we're attacking each other because we disagree about these various issues.
Right.
That's not helpful. And it's not helpful. We know that they have the enemy, whoever these group, they're going to infiltrate our movement. They're going to put agents in our movement, but it's not helpful for us to start pointing and saying, we think so-and-so is because they disagree with us, they must be an enemy, or they must be an agent or whatever. That's not helpful. Any movement that gets into that mode is gonna self-destruct. And that's.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that you were saying that. Yeah, I know you're not saying that. There are people who are saying that though. And my concern with that is that if we allow some of our best evidence to be kind of taken off the table, with the objective of having unity, it's just kind of like, it's just agreeing on the lowest common denominator. That's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah,
So
well,
I think
I understand that concern, but that's not what I'm suggesting. What I mean by
No.
unity. What I mean
Right.
by unity is respect.
Right, I understand. I'm commenting on Gene's comment.
Right.
And so I'm not suggesting that's what you're saying, but I'm suggesting, and this is something I hear a lot in the movement, is this idea that, well, because of some area might be considered controversial, that we should not look, we should just put it aside. And we don't do that with the World Trade Center. Nobody says forget about controlled demolition because we're not unanimous. So I don't think we should do it with any aspect of 9/11. So that's the only point. That's just the point that I was trying to make.
All right. I agree. Well taken.
Rebecca has her hand raised. Go ahead, Rebecca. We can't hear you. Your microphone's not working. Still not working. Do you want to put your question in the chat, maybe?
I just got a real quick one. To date, have we gotten any congressman to acknowledge the Bobby McIlvaine World Trade Center investigation draft legislation?
Not to my knowledge.
Yep. Thank you.
You want to try again, Rebecca? Oh dear, I'm sorry. Your voice isn't coming through.
Does it work now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you go.
I don't know what was up with it. I just wanted to comment on the unity thing. I think that I just had a thought that there's ways to deal with discussing things like infiltration without having a conflict where people are just, basically making accusations in a divisive manner. I mean, there are people that sometimes abuse the term unity also. There are people who actually harm other people who are activists and then call upon unity so that those people are silenced and they can't actually address the concerns that have harmed them or alienated them or, so like there are some ways that people can use the term unity in a manipulative manner where they're not really having a completely they're approaching it in a disingenuous way where they're actually using that, where they're actually acting in a way that is harmful to unity, but then they're calling on the person who tries to discuss those issues and saying, oh no, we need unity. So my concern is just that people are sensitive to like what the actual intentions are, in terms of unity. I agree, like you have to have an objective and in your group, you have to be focused when you have a goal. You have to be unified on that goal. That doesn't mean people can't disagree, and also doesn't, to me, mean that people can't, in a civil manner, discuss like, maybe some difficulties that are happening within the group, if like it's necessary in an internal setting, maybe in the group. That's the only comment I wanted to make.
Thank you, Rebecca. Did you want to add to that, Roland?
Well, actions speak louder than words. Look at people's behavior and how that affects your efforts, and regardless of what they say, if what they're doing is disruptive and consistently so, then you have to make a judgment about whether they really are what's really going on here. Is it just a personality defect or is it a deliberate act? over time, these things reveal themselves, I believe. So you just have to pay attention to that. You know, look at what people do, not just what they say.
Yeah, I don't want to get into like a debate about that. I understand what you're saying. I mean, my point was more just that I'm not coming from the point of we're going to accuse this person of doing that or this in some sort of aggressive manner. I'm talking about just attempting in a good faith manner to resolve issues. Because there are people who have acted in a bad faith manner and then called upon unity in order to silence people who were actually harmed by their behaviors. So there has to be some type of, I guess, good faith discussion to resolve these internal issues sometimes without disrupting the group in terms of their focus and their goals. I am completely supportive of having a goal like for the group. And if you are working on a goal, you have to be disciplined to focus on the objective.
Thank
You
you.
have no argument for me on that regard.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? Oh, Sandra. Yes. Go ahead, Sandra.
Nothing really of any critical value. I just wanted to thank Roland for making that distinction between being united and being unanimous, because those are two very different things, and we can be united as one force and focus on the main things which most of us do agree on, and even if we're not unanimous about all the evidence. So I just thank you for underlining that, because apparently I have a lot of trouble getting that across. So that's it. Just wanted to thank you.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. And I often find myself in a minority opinion. You know, my opinions, a lot of times I'm on the I'm not on the winning side of a debate that's going on within, say, the board or a particular committee or whatever. You know, we all have to learn to just accept the fact that not everybody's going to think like we think. Mm-hmm. And you know, time will tell. These things work themselves out over time. You just have to be patient and keep at it, and not allow it become an issue that of personal, you know, animosity because somebody happens to disagree with you.
Yeah, and it just becomes a distraction.
I don't think what I was talking about had anything to do with disagreement, really. It had to do with behavior that is intended deliberately to sideline people who are just good activists in good faith.
I'd like to add to that a little bit. If we can't talk to one another, how are we going to do our public outreach? You know, we have to learn how to talk to one another before we can have any hope of public outreach. That's all. All right. Anyone else?
We're coming up to 8:15. I don't know how much time Roland has. We move on to the Boston 9/11 agenda, which is more housekeeping for this particular group. You're welcome to stay on, or if you feel like you've heard enough and you want to get to doing what you need to do.
All right. Well, I think if you finished our dialogue, I'll leave the meeting and let you take care of your normal business. And I want to thank you once again for inviting me on and giving us the opportunity to have this dialogue together. And I've got some notes here and I'll follow up on. And the people that wanted to talk to me about other issues or had something that they suggested, please forward it to me. My email, my personal email, I don't use my email much on AE 9/11 Truth. My personal email is roleangle@gmail.com. That's the best way to reach me. So thank you very much again, and I'll depart at this time.
Before you depart, I want to just Thank you. I'm sure everyone here will agree that this was an extremely valuable discussion. And we're going to put it up on our YouTube and our website, and share it to the broader audience that were not able to join us tonight. We were so honored to have you join us. Thank you again, Roland.
Thank you. And thanks for all the great work you're all doing.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you. It was
Yeah.
extraordinary and I appreciate every minute of it.
Thank you very much.
Whoops. No.